One of the fundamental factors at play in the horrifying situation that is ongoing in the Middle East right now is radical religious ideology. I think most people are already familiar with the role that radical Islam plays in this issue. Hamas is a jihadist terrorist organization who has, as its mandate, a religious duty to wipe out Israel. The government of Iran supports Hamas and regularly leads chants in its state assemblies where they shout, "Death to Israel" and "Death to America." But up until a few days ago, I couldn't even have told you what the radical form of Judaism is. And now, after having looked into it, and as I'm about to show you, I believe it's just as disgusting as anything a radical jihadist would believe. I have heard from many people that Israel has a far-right government, but because a lot of these same people say that Donald Trump is a far-right fascist and all of his supporters are right-wing racists, I admittedly did not take the claims that Israel had a far-right government very seriously. So let me state this very clearly. The current Israeli government contains radical religious extremists whose ideology is as disgusting and backwards as the ideology of the religious extremists in a country like Iran. Case in point, Ben Gvir is the head of the Jewish Power Party, whose supporters believe that because their Bible says so, they are the chosen people of God and their rights matter more than everyone else's.
הזכות שלי, של אשתי, של הילדים שלי, להסתובב בכבישי יהודה ושומרון, יותר חשוב מזכות התנועה של הערבים. סליחה מוחמד, אבל זו המציאות, זו האמת, זכות החיים שלי קודמת לזכות.
Ben Gvir was also convicted of supporting a U.S.-designated terrorist organization in 2007, and he was actually exempt from serving in the IDF because of his extreme views, exemplified by him shouting, "Death to the Arabs." But all of this pales in comparison to this insanity. Up until a few years ago, Ben Gvir praised and hung a picture of Baruch Goldstein in his living room. Baruch Goldstein was a Jewish supremacist mass shooter who in 1994 massacred 29 Muslims at a Palestinian mosque.
4 minutes into Fajr prayer, as Palestinian worshippers bowed down in sujood, Goldstein opened fire, killing 29 Palestinians, some of them as young as 12.
Oh, and by the way, this man is the Minister of National Security for Israel. So step back for a second and think of this comparison. This would be like if in the United States, the head of the Department of Homeland Security had a picture of Dylan Roof in his living room. That is the level of disgusting, degenerate insanity that is operating at the highest levels of the current far-right terrorist sympathizing Israeli government. Now, to step back and to be perfectly clear, I am not suggesting that radical Judaism presents the same level of danger as radical Islam. The latter has obviously killed and oppressed far more innocent Arabs, Muslims, and Jews than radical Judaism. And I don't play these stupid per capita games where we apply multipliers to the death counts or kill counts to make our comparisons between ethnicities even.
This is the equivalent, what Israel experienced, woke up to Saturday morning, was the equivalent proportionately of 7 9/11s in one day.
1,000 dead innocents is 1,000 dead innocents. It doesn't matter what the population size of their ethnicity is. And here's what I find to be even more absurd. Israel is completely free to suggest that there aren't really any innocents in Gaza because they voted for Hamas, and they could have, risen up against them?
It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we're at war. We are at war. We're at war we're defending our homes. We're protecting our homes.
Imagine how insane you would have to be to hold Israel to this same standard. Well, everyone, because a frighteningly non-trivial proportion of Israel's population appears to subscribe to the heinous, mass shooter sympathizing ideology of the Jewish Power Party, it's fair game to bomb their population centers because A, there's probably terrorist sympathizers hiding amongst them, and B, they could have led a coup d'etat against their terrorist government. That would be idiocy, because everyone with a shred of common sense can agree radical extremists in the Israeli government are not representative of the average religious Jew, let alone the millions of secular Jews who hate the radical Judaic extremists more than anyone. Prior to the attacks by Hamas, Israel actually was on basically the verge of civil war because Netanyahu's far-right government is so obviously backwards and hated by so many people. So do not think for a second that the existence of dipshits like Ben Gvir gives anyone license to suggest that all or most Jewish people are anything but normal, everyday, innocent civilians. In fact, there are probably 10 to 100 times as many religious Jews who care more about the Palestinians than these psychopathic left-wing lunatics in the United States who froth at the mouth at the thought of innocent Jewish people being killed by Hamas.
It was exhilarating, it was energizing. If they weren't exhilarated by this challenge to the monopoly of violence, by this shifting of the balance of power, then they would not be human. I was exhilarated.
If there is a path forward to peace, it begins by telling the truth. And the truth is, Stalin may have killed more people than Ted Bundy, but if you're a fan of either of them, you're equally insane in my book. We rightfully demand from the Palestinians that they cease their support for Hamas, and I see no reason whatsoever why we don't hold Israel to the same standard with their extremists. I have no interest in the United States getting involved in yet another war, especially when the cause of that war can be laid squarely at the feet of extremist religious ideologies. Until we recognize that that is at the root of this conflict, we have no chance of solving it.